But then the women in my program underneath her, it was like just down the pyramid, everybody started acting in the same way, doing the same things. Like, and that's when I was like, you know what? Like, I don't think I want this.
Welcome to another video in the scam interview series where I chat with individuals who have been impacted by the coaching industry. I was going to say negatively, but that's not always the case. You know, we've had some happy conversations on this channel. Today's interview is of particular interest to me as an individual who used to own a yoga business. I had the privilege of sitting down with this lovely individual who herself is also a yoga or movement teacher, and as you're about to hear, fell into a yoga business coaching scam, which honestly, the entire yoga teacher industry could be a video in itself. In fact, if that's something you want me to cover, because I have a lot of thoughts about it, let me know in the comments. Needless to say, we have a really great conversation about her experience in this specific coaching program, as well as the perspective around demonizing the 9 to 5 and how maybe being an entrepreneur isn't for everyone. So as always, I'm not going to do too much talking. I will let the interview speak for itself. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Before we do so, I do want to shout out my channel VIP members. Thank you so much for being here, as well as the members of the billionaire tier. Thank you so much for your support. If you're enjoying this content, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Now let's go ahead and get into the interview.
I fell kind of into, I would call it a coaching trap, because it does feel like a trap to me, after being through one. That was in, I would say, like 2009 and 2010. And I, like many people, had a 9 to 5 job, very stable job. But I was interested in teaching full time. I teach yoga and other movement modalities, flow arts like hula hooping and other props, things like that. If you're familiar with that community, they often overlap with the yoga community. So I had been through some trainings and I do really enjoy teaching. That's something that I love. So I wanted to take that full time if I could. Again, like many people across my feed, came someone in my network that was running a coaching program. And what was interesting to me was that she ran a flow festival, a flow and yoga festival on the East Coast. So I was like, okay, it seems like this woman could help me and help me steer my business or start my business, because I wanted to do some similar things that she was doing. So I'm like, okay, this seems like a good fit. I got on a discovery call. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, she was just parroting back to me what I had told her. So my biggest things was that I didn't really know how to start a business and I needed help. I needed a good foundation of how to start, because that's kind of where my block was at the time. It was a little overwhelming. So I wanted help with that. I wanted help with marketing myself. And then I wanted help kind of niching down, because where I live in the Western US, there are like yoga teachers, movement teachers, we're a dime a dozen. So it's like, I needed help finding my niche and marketing to a certain like subset of people to be successful. I knew that that is something that I needed to do. And she's like, yeah, this mastermind group that I'm doing will totally cover foundations, and like, yeah, it's perfect fit.
I'm curious, before you got on that call, did you have to
Yeah.
fill out like a survey or something that like, oh, where's your business at? Because you know, a lot of the times they make you fill out like a Google form that's like, oh, I wish I had 1,000 clients. Ooh.
Oh,
And then they use that against you in the call. That's more why I'm asking.
sure. I don't remember that. I know that she had a website, and I think I may have just like requested like like it was sort of like a Calendly time,
Gotcha.
suggestion that I got. I don't remember filling out a form about that. So it was
So it was
more of
more
just,
like when you were on the call, she was asking you questions and then repeating that back to you.
and it kind of just, looking back on it now, from what I remember, it was just, yeah, like a rephrase, like an active listening technique, but more in like a malicious way. not in like a I hear you way. It's
How can I
definitely
use this to convince you you need me?
bingo. Yes, it felt like that. And I definitely, like a lot of the people that you talk to, after I got on the phone with her and I heard the price, which I remember it being around $4,000 or $5,000. But there was a catch. If you signed up within 24 hours, a fee, which I don't even know what the fee was honestly for, was waived, right? And that was like a $500 sort of fee. So it was essentially like, oh, you get a discount if you sign up. And I know that everybody's like, oh, well, if you're panicking and like you felt like it was wrong, then why did you still do it? But in my mind, and I was in my like very late 20s, early 30s at the time, I bought into that mentality of like, you can't afford not to do it. It's like, how else are you going to figure this out all on your own? Like, you do need a mentor, you do need somebody to like show you how to do this. There is a part of that that I don't think is wrong. I think having mentors and, people to kind of show you the ropes is helpful. And I believed that this person would just like show me everything and I would get set up and I'd be on my way and everything would be fine. And so I was like, okay, like I'll do it. Like it'll be great. We start the program. And as the program is progressing, I start to realize that the things that I'm really wanting and needing are not being addressed. So there was no like really tangible business training. Like, how do I set up an LLC? Like, what legal things do I need to approach in setting up an LLC? And how is that different than maybe like a sole proprietor? And like, what are the pros and cons of each one? Like, that is the information that I was looking for because that was the most important stuff is like, how do I set up my business like logistically and legally so that I have everything I need? And I was also looking for like, like what kinds of good software would you use for finance tracking or like budgeting or, as well as the marketing piece. But as we got into it, it was all just basically mindset. There was a few things that she gave us along the way in terms of marketing that were useful, but honestly, they're not worth like $4,000 to $5,000. Like I learned about Canva and Fiverr, which are things I still use today, but like a quick Google search would have gotten me there. So I don't feel like my return on investment was really that much. And so I would say like about halfway through, I was really starting to lose trust and faith. And then it kind of started snowballing and compounding. And I remember a few of the calls that the group was on with her. She would ask for successes, like who had successes this week and what were they, and nobody would respond. And her response to that was, you're making me feel like a bad coach.
Maybe you should take a hint.
To me, that was like the first thing that really like alarm bells really started to go off, because it's like, number one, I can't really make you feel a certain way. Sure, my actions have consequences, but if you're coaching me and I'm not being successful in the things you want me to be successful in, how's that all my fault? Like, yeah, like if you feel like a bad coach, then maybe you are a bad coach. Like
If I'm offering a service to whatever 5-10 people and none of those 5 to 10 people are getting any results, you'd think that would be like a trigger in your head to be like, maybe my strategies aren't very effective. Not, oh, it's your fault. You guys are making me feel a certain way. Like, no, maybe you should take those results as a moment of self-reflection to realize like, perhaps I should change my approach.
Like in terms of being like a yoga teacher or a movement teacher, if I'm cueing somebody to do something and the cue isn't landing and, someone is putting themselves in a position that may potentially hurt themselves or something like that, then that's on me. That's on the person in charge of the room and in charge of the program to change the way that I approach it so that person can have success, so they can get the experience that I'm trying to guide them into. So that was like my first major red flag, was like, it's my fault that this program isn't working for me. And then shortly after that, I had been thinking about like how I really wanted to approach being a full-time teacher, if that was something that I really did want to get into. And after thinking about it for a while, I was like, well, maybe I could start a studio space. And I suggested this on a group call, so in front of everybody else that was on the program. And my coach essentially said, no, that's not what we're doing here. We're doing freedom-based businesses. So,
Like location freedom?
yeah.
Oh, why does that? Okay, I'm confused. Like,
Yeah, and it was just like really disheartening. It was essentially like,
exactly.
no, you're wrong. Like you should be modeling your business after my business, which is where I can travel and go around and do what I want and have all this freedom. And I'm not tied down to a physical location. And if you open a studio, then you're tied down to a physical location. And that's not what we're doing here. We're doing freedom-based businesses.
And was that clear to you when you signed up that that's what it was
No.
about? It was just like grow your yoga business.
Yeah, it was like become an entrepreneur. It was marketed as entrepreneurship, which I was like, great, that I feel drawn to that and I feel into that. So, okay, like let's do it. And on the same call, there was another girl in my group who wanted to start a business coaching college age women and helping them be successful in their college experience. And so my coach praised her and was like, yeah, it sounds like what you want to do is a coaching business and be a coach. And that's really great. So it was like very starkly like, this is what's okay. And this is what's not okay. And that is when I finished the program and I continued the program, but it was a little half-hearted because it didn't feel really aligned and it didn't feel like I was being particularly supported in the path that I wanted to take, which is not why you hire a coach, first of all. And then after the program sort of ended, I started kind of noticing because I kept her in my network on my socials. And at the time, I was very active in the flow community and the yoga community. And so a lot of the people in my network, I noticed, had started posting about their coach and how their coach is really helping them. But what was alarming to me was like one person would start to train to run a marathon. Then all these other women, it was like dominoes. And then everybody else now is training to run a marathon and becoming a marathon runner. To me, it felt like the cool girls at school. And I didn't want to be in the cool girls club. I
And so was
wanted to
this was the mastermind that you had signed up for. It turned into this.
yeah, and it started, and also it was not only the mastermind, but it was also people outside of the mastermind because there was a few other women in my network, but they shared the same coach that my coach did. So my coach, these other women's, they had their coach, but then the women in my program underneath her, it was like just down the pyramid, everybody started acting in the same way, doing the same things, and that's when I was like, you know what, I don't think I want this. I don't want to be in this club or whatever. I want to do my own thing. I want to have my own personality and approach these things in my own way.
Kudos to you for being able to recognize that, because I feel like a lot of the times when you're in those environments, it's very difficult to see that it's happening. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've seen my content. I talk a lot about
Yeah.
like copy paste coach, for example. And so all of a
Yeah.
sudden everyone's Instagram feed looks exactly the same. And I think when you're kind of in that,
Yeah.
you're not really thinking like, oh, I'm using this specific font in this specific format and it looks exactly like my coach's, because my coach is the one that told me to do it. So I'm just kind of blindly listening and following the leader, right? So it's very easy to kind of get sucked into that. So I think there's credit due to you for being able to, like, while you're in it, recognize what's happening and be like, ooh, I don't want to be a part of this, because not a lot of people have that sort of foresight.
Right. And I think for me, like one of the biggest things was at the time my father had fallen ill. And so I had moved back home with him and I was taking care of him. And I was able to pay for this program out of pocket. I cash flowed it while I was working full time. And so it didn't put me into debt. It didn't put me into an unstable financial position. So I didn't feel like I had to continue because I was in a stable position. It was easier. And I think that's a big part of it too. It's like people feel like they paid for this program, they should pursue it, they should continue to pursue it. And that's what's sold to you too, is like, we'll continue to invest. But for me, it was like, I was very, very fortunate. And I recognize that I had this stability and that I didn't necessarily like need to feel like I needed to continue to put in more because I was in a stable position and I didn't have this credit card balance like staring me in the face.
Exactly. Like I need to, meet this sales quota or do this particular thing because my coach is telling me, because if I don't, like I'm going to fail. I think when you don't have that pressure of like, you hear a lot of the people like, oh, I quit my job and I had no choice but to make my business work. Well, then that's when you're going to start to maybe make these decisions you wouldn't otherwise. So that makes a
Right.
lot of sense.
Absolutely. Like I had the stable job, I had a stable place to live. I didn't, I had a really awesome support system around me at the time too. So, yeah, it was easy to just kind of look around and be like, I don't think I need this. Like I have community and I'm involved. So, that's played a big part, I think, in being able to just kind of survey my landscape and know that um being me, my own individual self, might be a little bit better than like following this huge online crowd, essentially.
Yeah, it kind of allows you that opportunity to take that sort of third party perspective of like, okay, what's
Mhm.
actually going on here? Is this conducive to where I want to go, or can I ask a few questions?
Right. I mean, of course, there is a little bit of regret, but I feel like my biggest regret, honestly, was in the beginning of the program when I was still really invested and believing in the program and in my coach. She did have someone reach out to me for a referral. And I did tell this person, like, yes, this program will work for you. And I still think about that to this day. And I'm still like, man, I hope that it worked out okay for them. Like maybe they did end up making six figures in a month. Like maybe they did. And I hope that they did. But that's one thing. Like if I could go back and not do one thing, it would be that. It would to not give that referral.
Did you get a kickback from that, or that was genuinely just like, hey, I'm working with this person, you should too?
No, whoever this person was rightfully trying to vet. So they reached out to my coach and asked for references.
I see. Okay.
And then my coach passed her information along to me and was like, hey, this person is looking for a reference. Would you be willing to give it to her? And I
I
was
see.
like, and I did. And
Okay.
it was a positive one. Though if somebody were to ask me now, I would be like,
Run away.
don't do that.
Yeah, I only
Yeah.
asked that because I spoke with another individual. And for those of you watching, I'll link his interview here. But he had a referral from a friend being like, oh my God, this coach is amazing. Joins the program, realizes the coach is a fraud. But it turns out the guy that referred him was getting like $1,000 kickback for referring him into the program. So it's like you have to be question people's intentions, right? So I was just asking out of curiosity mostly, but that's actually
Yeah.
wild that the coach would directly be like, hey, can you refer this person into the program, like help me make more money?
Yeah. When you say it like that, like that's just like, I was just trying to be nice and I view
And
myself as
helpful, right?
and
Like, oh
helpful, right? And I
yeah,
think I consider myself to be a good-natured, kind-hearted person, and I just wanted to extend that to somebody who I thought was helping me, but who in the
of
end
course.
was not helping me at all.
And
Yeah.
again, when you're in it, you don't see it. Like, I mean, if someone had have asked me while I was like actively in coaching, if I would refer someone to my mentor, I probably would have done the exact same thing. And it's only like once I'm out of it and I realize like what was actually going on, that I'm like, oh my God, never. So hindsight's 2020.
Exactly. And I did at the end of my mastermind group, I did see like another coaching opportunity on Facebook, and I was so close to signing up for it again. But like luckily, like I talked myself out of it. I was like, no, you don't need to like you don't need to do this all over again. And that's just like the algorithm picks up that you're in a coaching program. And I think that this is another reason why people get sucked in so easily is because and it's not malicious, like the algorithm just gives you more of what you look at. So if you're looking at coaching content, it's going to feed you more coaching content. And then it's just so easy to be like, oh, well, if I just do more, I can like coach myself out of whatever position that I'm currently in. And the more I do it, the more I'll just like coach myself out of my current situation in life. And that's not always the case.
Or like, I think a lot of the times too, we almost trick ourselves into thinking like, okay, that program didn't work, but this one really sounds like it's going to hit the spots that I need help with. So maybe this is going to be the one that I need. And then it's like, okay, that one didn't work. Okay, now the next one, maybe this one's the one that I need. Because again, they're so good with their marketing and their messaging and the way they speak to, you know, the things that you're struggling with, that it's very easy if you don't have that discernment to be like, oh, you know what? I bet this person's legit. I bet they're going to be able to help me. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think like the longer, at least I'm hoping that the tides turn, but it's so easy to believe people online that make themselves look successful. And you have no way of knowing whether or not they really are as successful as they claim to be.
or if they even have like the knowledge and the skills that they claim to have as well. Like, I think
Oh,
that's a piece. Like
right.
anyone can say, oh, I made $100,000. Cool. I don't know if that's true or not. But for me to say like, I have the marketing strategy that's going to 10x your business. Do I actually? No, I could be sitting here on Google, like how to market a business while I'm on a coaching call with you. Like there's no way to
Right.
prove anyone's experience either.
Right. And it's not right. It's not regulated. It's not.
Exactly.
Let's take the example of yoga teachers. It's semi-regulated, so you can register with Yoga Alliance and you can at least go through a program that's been approved by somewhat of an oversight. But that doesn't mean that you're going to wind up getting a good yoga teacher or even a yoga teacher that's going to fit what you need. And it's really hard to find someone that's going to like help you with exactly what you need without like doing a bunch of research and things like that. So people just like popping up on your social media feed, it's like there's nothing there. There's no like foundation or like structure there for you to even try to suss that out, whether it's good or bad or helpful or not.
Exactly. And if you can like show up confidently enough on camera and like speak charismatically or like act like you know what you're doing, chances are someone out there is going to believe you, right? So like the more
Yeah,
practice you get at that, the more people you can dupe into whatever thing you're trying to shill.
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So then what was your experience kind of after the fact? So you said you went through this mastermind, you then came out of it, you considered joining another one. What was the like what has your journey been since then, I suppose?
I continued to work full time and then have just continued to teach on the side more as a hobby and just because it's something that I love doing and it does enrich my life and I get fulfillment from it. And it did take many years to kind of deprogram all of that messaging that 9 to 5s are bad and they weigh you down and it would be so much better if you had this freedom and you could just do whatever you want whenever you want. But the more that I researched being a business owner and owning a successful business, I found that that wasn't necessarily true. It's like if you're a business owner, like you are tied to your business 100% of the time. So even if you do take a vacation, sometimes you're still having to field calls or reach out to clients or do, this and that. And so for me, I just decided that I would keep full-time work and do my stuff on the side. And it's worked out really well for me. And I don't feel that my 9 to 5 weighs me down. If anything, it gives me financial freedom to do what I want. And right now I have a job that gives me a lot of PTO. So I'm still pretty much able to go where I want, when I want to, and still be able to teach when it works for me and in the ways that it works for me. So if I have any message to say, it's a 9 to 5 job is not that bad if you can get a good one.
I think that's it too. Besides like people glamorizing entrepreneurship, I think a lot of the people I've seen in the online space, and this is obviously like a very large generalization, but many of these people I've seen either haven't had like an actual 9 to 5, like a corporate job. They've worked, retail or a waitressing gig or something, and they're like, "Oh, I quit my 9 to 5 to become a coach or become an entrepreneur." And it's like, okay, first of all, you never had a 9 to 5. The other
Right.
thing is like, and I mean, this was my case back when I left my job and started, doing yoga, coaching, that kind of thing. And I used to follow the same train, 9 to 5 suck, everyone, blah, blah, blah. But I had only ever had one 9 to 5 job and it did suck, but I had no
Yeah.
other experience. So I was using this like one horrible job that I had, painting it with broad strokes of like every 9 to 5 must suck because mine sucked. Like, no, I have friends now that obviously work 9 to 5 jobs that love them. Like they do exist, but it's so easy for these people to just like paint a picture of like, well, my 9 to 5 was terrible, so every 9 to 5 must be terrible.
Right. And I can't, I agree with that. I certainly have had 9 to 5s that were awful, that were just plain awful. But the great thing is that there's jobs to be had. So if you have an awful 9 to 5, you can find another one that
Exactly.
is not awful. And
Like
that's what,
entrepreneurship doesn't have to be the alternative. You could just go
right.
somewhere else.
Exactly. Like you can just find a better fit for yourself or like make your commute less timely, find a remote job. Like there's so many options. It's not just 9 to 5 or entrepreneurial. There's a lot of things in between that people can do. And yeah, it's really up to you, like what the best choice is. There's no one size fits all.
100%. And I think just like fully understanding what it means to be self-employed. It's like the unpredictable schedule, the fact that like you are now accountable to yourself. There's no one telling you what to do. I remember when I left my job, the biggest thing I struggled with was like, what the hell am I supposed to do all day? Like no one's here to tell me what to do. So I'm just supposed to like make it up. Things
Yeah.
like that are like, they're again glamorized of like, oh, I have all this freedom. I can do whatever I want. But it's like, no, at the end of the day, you got to figure out how you're going to make money. So what are you going to do? Like, I really don't think the majority of people are suited for entrepreneurship, but these people paint it online like everyone should do it and everyone should want it. And if you don't, you're a loser.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought up that point because that's how I decided that a 9 to 5 was a better choice for me. I'm not great at setting up structure for myself. If there is someone else doing it for me, like you need to be here between this hour and this hour, and here are some things that you need to do as a part of this job, like that's great. I can execute really well there, but doing that for myself is something that I've struggled with my entire life. So it's like I need that structure, and that's why this works for me, and I've designed my life this way. And I do admire people that have the discipline and the drive to be an entrepreneur, to structure their days and to stay committed to that work and to hold themselves accountable, because that's not something I have. But I think it's like it's such a great, it's just amazing that people can do that, and I really admire that in other people. It's just that's not the life for me, and that's okay. Both are okay.
Exactly. And being able to recognize that, I think, is so important. Because again, when you're inundated with these Facebook ads, it's very easy to be like, maybe I should do that. When it's like, no, I know myself and I know that that's not the right option for me. Awesome. Do you have any parting like words of wisdom that you'd like to share with anyone who's maybe considering, dabbling in the coaching space or is in a position where they're kind of feeling the pull in one direction or another?
I would say start utilizing the tools that you have for free or very cheap instead of diving into a coaching program. I will always big up local libraries. I know that the libraries in my area oftentimes will host entrepreneurial networking sites or networking events. So if those are in your areas, or even just search for those in your areas and go and talk to people who are entrepreneurials and have businesses and see if they'll take you on for free of charge. That's another thing. Just use those free tools or low cost tools before jumping into a high cost program. There's a lot of resources out there that are at your disposal that you can use before you start to pay a lot of money for things that may or may not help you.
100%. And I know in Canada as well, I've spoken to a few people in the US that have these. Many communities here have small business centers. So they're basically like
Yeah,
not for profits that will provide you with the resources you need to be able to start a business. So that's always a great starting point as well to, like you said, find the free resources, the people that know what they're talking about, and explore those versus someone who's selling you on this promise of like, you pay me $5,000 and I'll teach you how to make $5,000. Because that in
right.
itself is a red flag.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind, and I don't know if you have them in Canada, but in the US, we have chambers of commerce, and they're usually built around cities. Getting in touch with chambers of commerce, like most of those are comprised of small businesses or entrepreneurs that would be happy to have you and to just like have coffee with you and talk to you about what they do and how they started their business and all of that. So those are all just great free resources that are at people's disposal.
100%. Thank you so much for sharing. I
Yeah,
really appreciate that. And thanks for coming on and sharing your story. I know
yeah,
I always say this, but every time someone can come and talk to me and share their experience, there's somebody out there watching this video like, oh my God, I had the exact same thing happen to me. So I really do
yes.
appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
I do want to give a big thank you to Lisa for participating in the interview. I always appreciate anyone who's willing to come on and share their story because these conversations are so, so important to bring more awareness to a lot of what's happening in the coaching space. If you have a story that you want to share here on this channel, the form to submit interest in being featured is linked down below. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoyed this interview, I will leave you with another one right here on screen. Take care, comb your hair, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!